for joining us. I'm Amy DeLouise. I'm your host for the Tequity Hub. This is Tequity Tuesday, and our topic today is Money Smart Women Financial Planning for Media Pros with Tacy, Roby. And I'm just so excited to welcome you, Tacy, for this webinar.
Nice to see everybody. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And before we jump in, I would be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsors. I want to do a special shout out to Signiant and AJA for coming on board with our Tequity Hub, and some of our regular event sponsors, Dell, Adobe, and AWS. So thank you all for being part of the GALSNGEAR community and making it possible for us to have free programs like this one that you can learn something from and take it right back into your real life. So before we get going, Tacy, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about you, your company, and what drives you to do this kind of work.
Absolutely. Well, I firmly believe that every woman should be in charge of her financial life, whether she's in a partnership, a marriage, she needs to be in charge of her financial life. And part of that stems from being the daughter of a divorced mom who was single, who took lots of different jobs over the years and did a great job, but still had to keep working until she was 82 years old, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. And then I was extraordinarily fortunate because at 25, I had a mentor who taught me how to invest. And that set me on a different trajectory. And so I do this work because I want that women to have that same kind of confidence in their own finances. And that's why I chose this career.
Fantastic. So, tell me a little bit about kind of what's involved. What are some of the things that women need to be doing so that they can leverage their good instincts for investing?
Well, part of it is mindset, really. A lot of it is mindset. I mean, when we think of Wall Street and investing, we think of men in dark suits, right? We think of them in the movies. And in fact, women are great investors. And on the next slide, we can see I call them the Magnificent Seven of investing instincts. And those are the instincts that are the same as Warren Buffett. And I know that it's ironic to put a man up there when I talk about women in investing. He is one of the most famous, and he has an outstanding track record. Since he has been in charge of Berkshire Hathaway, his portfolio has returned on average 19%, which is twice as much as the return of the stock market, the S&P 500. So let's go through what those Magnificent Seven instincts are: researching before buying, diversifying instead of concentrating, buying and holding investments, limiting costly trades, investing with values, deciding based on facts, not gut. And the seventh, not listed here, is investing in companies we trust. Companies that are trustworthy, that treat their workers well, that treat the environment well, are the kinds of companies that have less government fines, and so therefore end up being better investments over time.
That's interesting. So you're mentioning these instincts. So what are some ways to leverage those?
Well, in addition to knowing that we have these great instincts, I want to just give a couple of data points, Amy, before we go into leveraging.
Oh, yes, please.
Right. So on the next, we talked a little bit about how women have these great instincts, but let's look at some of the data. Fidelity Investments about 12 years ago did a study of 8 million accounts that showed that men's performance was less than women's performance in their investments by 1%. They updated the study a few years ago. Now it's 0.4%. However, that still adds up to a lot of dough over 10 years. Another study by the University of Warwick of 2,800 accounts show that women's accounts investment performance was actually 2% greater than men. So there is data that's out there. And this message is getting through to a lot of people, particularly investors who have come into the marketplace in the last 5 years. And JP Morgan in September of 2024, or maybe it was October, showed that among new investors, 51% of the new investors were Hispanic and Latino women, and about 28% were Black or African American women. So this message of the power of investing is really getting through. And the number one reason cited was building generational wealth. So it's not only building wealth for yourself, but building wealth for the next generation of your family. So Amy, going back to your question about how do we put this into play, part of this is around understanding your values. Studies show that women will want to invest because it gets them something they want, because it aligns with a core value of theirs. So I'm actually going to ask you to take a moment, about a minute, and look at this slide and write down or take notes in your phone of what are 5 or 6 values that you have. And don't worry, I've got a timer and I'll let everybody know when there's a minute that's up. And just look at the screen when you're done, so I know you're done. Awesome. So can people just put some of their values in the chat?
Freedom and adventure. I love that, Alyssa. Compassion, freedom, and family. I put in independence and authenticity, gratitude, financial stability, making a difference, definitely making a difference. That's great. Integrity, respect, awareness of complexity, a sense of humor and wonderment. That's great. Legacy, good one. Trust. Authenticity and living my truth. Excellent. Making a difference, independence, fulfillment, and spirituality. I know that's Carla. I can tell. That's great. Okay, I think we've got a lot of good ones here, Tacy.
We do. Amy, did you want to talk a little bit about one of your values about sustainability? Was that something you wanted to touch on, or?
Well, I did want to mention that just because it is, and I know Barbara Lang is on just very briefly with us before she pops into something else, and she's very involved in the sustainability movement in our industry. And you know, there are definitely some cross currents there because obviously with AI, especially, that's a big energy draw. And so, you know, some of the companies that are making a lot of great money for us in the market, NVIDIA, Alphabet, Microsoft, you know, there's many tech companies, they are investing in AI, and that, you know, can be a carbon heavy investment. So I think my question is just, you know, how do you kind of make sure that your values are aligned and you're still making a good margin on your investments?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things. One is these deep values around independence and authenticity and adventure and diversity. And there's also the value of sustainability, environmental responsibility, human rights, and that this is just simply good, smart, strategic investing. Companies that treat their workers well, as I said earlier, they have less government fines. Companies that treat the environment well over time are stronger business models. And so there are lots of different ways that you can look at investments. Almost every retirement plan now offers a sustainable, responsible investment option. And then you can even be more specific if you want to exclude certain companies. I have a client who does not like certain technology companies, and because of digital privacy rights, and so he excludes them from his portfolio, and we find substitutes in the technology field. So
Interesting.
I hope that's helpful to you. So Ashley, on the next slide, I just wanted to give people a little sense of how my deep values and my personal investing statement come together, because once you have these values, you want to have that personal investing statement as well. So first picture of me, I'm in Costa Rica. I was in Costa Rica for a spiritual retreat. I love adventure. I'm really happy. And I also do a fair amount of volunteer work. And SFEPD is a national financial literacy organization that I've done financial literacy work for at least a decade. Family is important to me. That's my deceased mom up there. Being stable is really important to me. We've been in our same house for years, and that's my husband. So
Somebody needs to mute their background. Thank you.
So if you want to put it together in a personal investing statement, which I encourage you really to do. So my statement is, my investments and savings enable our family to be financially strong with the freedom to pursue our dreams of travel and giving back. So I encourage people to do that kind of exercise. All right. So let's get into a little bit more about setting goals and priorities. And so that's the next slide. So these are some that link, you're linking your values to goals and a time horizon, right? Maybe someone mentioned the goal of freedom. That can look at paying off debt, and that's a short-term goal of 1 to 4 years. If it's maybe credit card debt, or it might be retiring at 67, which for some people may be 5 years from now, or it might be 30 years from now. But again, linking it out to values, goals, and time horizon. For some people, making sure that they've got life insurance is important in case anything happens to them, particularly if they're the primary breadwinner. And so that may be a cost. So you want to make sure that you have saved money to be able to do that. So that's just a way of linking things. And in the workshop I will mention this, in April, we actually have a workbook, and we work through all of these exercises together. So I hope people will be able to attend.
Yeah, let me jump in and just say, because there were not everybody was on at the top. So I just want to mention that Tacy will be at our leadership summit at NAB show. She'll be doing a more in-depth workshop. So as she mentioned, there'll be a workbook. You'll get a chance to really dive into this topic a little bit more. Our focus is on resilience redefined. So we're going to be talking about wellness and balance in the workplace, and financial wellness is a piece of that puzzle for women in media and entertainment. So we're super excited to have Tacy join us in exciting Las Vegas. So watch for our emails with a link to registration, which should be coming out in the next day or two. So you can make sure you get in, because last year we were sold out and we actually had to stop taking registrations. They've given us a bigger room, but I think with Tacy there, it's going to be popular. Back to you, Tacy, just a little advertisement.
Okay, all right. Well, everybody come if you can. That'd be great. So let's get down to some, while I'm here, I'm sorry, actually, let's go back to that slide of the goals and priorities. So one of the easiest ways you can do this is going to your bank app. Your bank app, my former employer and my bank, Truist, has a great app. So does Wells Fargo. And it will literally, there's a planning tab. And in that planning tab, you can pick a goal. And in that goal, let's pick an easy one, like, or not an easy one, but one that may be attainable pretty quickly, like saving $200 over 4 months. So you can put in savings, $200 over 4 months. It will link to a savings account that you already have. And if you don't have, then you can start one. And then it will tell you, let's say you've got $100 in your savings account, how many months it will take you to get to your goal, and how much money you have to save every week, every 2 weeks, or every month. Then, and this is critical, you can go back to the transfer tab or screen and set up an automatic transfer. And that automation is absolutely critical, because you're tricking your brain, you're hacking your brain to not see that money in your checking account so that you can spend it. And we really do have to hack our brains, because think about how easy it is to be tempted by that which is in front of us, be it a chocolate chip cookie or a potato chip or something along those lines. And I'll just say that was critical in my early success, was that when I was 25 and I started investing, as soon as I got a job out of graduate school, I started adding $100 a month in automatically into my investment account. And then when I got a raise, I added 50% of my raise and I got a bonus because I had a very specific goal. I wanted to live in a condo by myself, no roommates. So
That
that's
is so great, Tacy, about talking about automation and goals. I put those two calculators in the chat, so if you want to go to those links, you can see them. And I was lucky that my dad, who was an economist, encouraged me to save from day one, even though I was a freelancer and eating Cheerios like 3 times a day. To put something automated, even if it was just $20 a month, into savings and ultimately into retirement, a retirement IRA. So I think the automation thing is a really great hack.
good, good. So building on that concept around retirement applications, right? Some of you may be fortunate enough to have retirement plans through your workplaces. If you don't, you bankrate.com. Our custodian at our firm is Schwab, so I'm very familiar with the Schwab Schwab.com retire website. And essentially what it will do is once you log on, it will ask you a quiz and some inputs about how aggressive or conservative you want to be, how much money you make, how often do you get paid, and then it will ask, when do you want to retire? Many people these days are choosing 67 because for many people that is the first year that they can actually claim Social Security benefits. Some people are delaying getting their Social Security benefits if they're financially able to until age 70, and there's some reasons to do that. Namely, you get a higher benefit to do that, but again, not everybody can afford to delay their payments. So Amy, you sometimes you want to make sure that you had asked me about what are the inputs in some of those financial calculators.
Yeah, just because I know that, they often will say, well, what's your expected rate of return? Well, like, who knows that? And you want to be conservative, right? And how much are you going to put in and all that stuff. So what are just maybe some guidelines? I know it's going to be very specific to each person, but what would you recommend?
So I would, some of the calculators now are defaulting to 6% as a rate of return. And so start with that. That is the historical rate of return for a balanced portfolio that has been half invested in stocks and half invested in bonds, and that's over a 30-year time period. So I would start with that. One of the other things that it also is that people say, well, how much money can I withdraw? And there is a rule of thumb called a sustainable withdrawal rate, which has historically changed about 11 times since the 1920s, but has landed at 4% for about the last decade. And that's based on over a 30-year time period. If you're in a portfolio that's returned 6% on average, then you're not going to run out of money over that 30-year time period. So I'm able to really think about assuming a 4% withdrawal rate. The other thing that sometimes is true in these calculators is that the calculators assume that expenses adjust for inflation, but they're pretty constant over the course of your retirement. And the challenge is that, and this comes from the MIT lab on aging, is that retirement expenses are more like a smiley face. They're high in the beginning, right? You're doing a lot of things. Maybe you're traveling, then you are, and we call those the go-go years, and then they go down, and there's the slow-go years where you're not as active and you're staying at home more. And then at the end of life, there's the end of life medical costs, which are unfortunately called the no-go years. And so those so the calculator doesn't assume that kind of change in your expenses. So you have to be mindful about that.
And so would that be where somebody like you can do that because you have internal spreadsheets that are a little more specific to those kind of expenses and even sensitive to like what's the average nursing home cost, or, you know, just playing out different scenarios with a client?
Absolutely. That's exactly why you hire a financial planner, is that a financial planner, we have the software that can do different glide paths according to what your expenses might be. We can input different goals, such as if you have a goal that you want to leave a big legacy, or you have a goal that you want to spend all your money and not leave a big financial legacy. And the other is that when it comes to being able to think about a retirement, so I often encourage people, and this is an argument for working with a planner, is a planner will say to you, hey, if you can afford it, let put 1 to 3 years expenses in a savings account before you retire, because that way, if the market is down the year that you retire, you still have money in your savings account to live on, and you don't necessarily have to do withdrawal at age 67 when the market is down. So it's one of the reasons why working with a planner can help. The other is thinking about in retirement, where do you want to take your money from first, because there are tax consequences to where you take the money from. So yes, that's one big reason why you work with a planner.
Got it.
I think we wanted to talk a little bit about how you build a diversified portfolio, and women already know this, and that is you don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? And the reason being is that volatility, particularly volatility on the downside, is where investors get themselves in trouble, meaning they begin to doubt, they sell out, and then they don't, you have to make the decision of when to get back in. So the yellow line here shows a concentrated portfolio. A lot of people are very heavily concentrated in tech companies. I understand they've done really well. However, when that basket does fall apart, then you have a lot of volatility. So blending in your technology companies with your manufacturing companies, your service companies, your financial services can help you have a more diversified portfolio and have a less bumpy ride along the way, because investing is emotional. So let's talk about the emotions of investing next. So this is a chart. On the left-hand side, it's the S&P 500 index, and it is showing the return that started somewhere around a little bit below 1,500, right before in about 2006, and over the next 14, 15 years ago, in 2021, it ended up at a little bit around 4,200. However, along the way, there are a lot of emotions, right? One, you're really excited, you're joyful, you've done your research, you invest, it's fantastic. Oh my gosh. Well, then the market falls. And for a lot of people, this is anger. For some people, this is shame. For some people, this is fear or sadness. And the market begins to recover a little bit, but you're still not necessarily back to where you were in 2006. So now you're disgusted, like, why did I do this? Then, oh my gosh, the market's up again. You're so happy. Oh my gosh. And then the market falls, and anxiety. And then at the end, you're hopeful. And then guess what? The market begins to make changes, and you start somewhere else in that emotional cycle. So knowing this, it's helpful to put in some guardrails before you start. So on the next slide, we can talk about some of those stick-to-it strategies. So one is planning for problems, right? what is our plan to put money into savings in addition to our investing account, right? This is where having one to anywhere between 3 to 6 months in a savings account is really, really important. The other is growing less trigger prone, agreeing at a timeout period before acting, saying to yourself and writing it down, I'm going to talk to somebody more knowledgeable than me before I make a decision, or I'm going to take a financial media news diet for 90 days, and that's really hard to do, but you'll be amazed how it can help. How often are you going to check your portfolio? If you have a financial advisor, how often are you going to check with your financial advisor, right? And then you want to really write these things down before you start so that you've got a game plan for when it gets emotional.
Well, Tacy, also, I think going back to your point about automation, one of the great things my dad taught me, among many financial things, was that when the market is down, stocks are on sale. So
Right.
if you, I'm not suggesting that every time the market's down, you run out and buy extra stuff, although I kind of did that when the Obama crash happened and it was pretty helpful. But I think if you have something that's automatic, then you are automatically buying those stocks on sale, and the compounding interest really helps you out as the market climbs back out of that hole. And so it takes it away from that financial emotion, as you're saying, because it's just automated. And of course you can change your automations and you can change your allocations, but maybe do that with a little more perspective and not just on a trigger. Is that something you recommend?
Absolutely, absolutely, right. And certainly for those of us who are fortunate to see 2008 as an opportunity, it has paid off well. But I have to say, I had a lot of things automated, so I really wasn't thinking. It just kept.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's
and
very helpful.
I didn't have to think about whether it was a good time to buy. It just kept going, and then I did add
Right.
in.
And on the flip side of that, when something goes down, you're not just like, oh my God, or, I have to sell, or, it goes up, you suddenly want to buy, but that's when it's the highest price. So
Exactly.
it doesn't mean you can't add and subtract, but if you have an automated sort of baseline, it takes away a little bit of that sting.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think one of the things that we also want to talk a little bit about is when you are looking at hiring a financial advisor, what are some of the things that you want, right? And not everybody wants to work with a financial advisor. In fact, a lot of studies are showing that some people have financial advisors for some of their money, and they have their own investment accounts that they run as well. This is something that my husband and I do. We have a financial planner. Yes, I'm a financial planner, and I've hired a financial planner, and she's amazing. And I also have my own investment accounts. And so one of the things that you want to do, of course, is go to the advisor's website. And is the advisor a certified financial planner? Certified financial planners are the people who have taken 18 to 24 months of extra study and have sat for a pretty comprehensive exam. And equally as importantly, if not more importantly, they are fiduciaries. They must put your interest before theirs and disclose any potential conflicts of interest. The other is you want to look up their record. There's a great website called brokercheck.finra.org where you literally can look up their rap sheet, for lack of a better
Just
word.
drop that into the chat.
Yep. And you want to make sure they don't have any client complaints against them. They don't have any financial settlements, anything like that. You want a broker who's got a clean slate. And also you'll see where they worked and all that kind of stuff along the way. And then you want to find out how they're paid. Are they paid as a percentage of the assets that they manage for you? Do they do a flat fee, or are they commission people? And you just want to be clear about that. And PFP board has a terrific list of 10 questions that you can ask a financial advisor. And I encourage you to just download those questions, and whoever you're considering, just call them up and say, these are the questions that I'm going to ask. And essentially, it's like creating your own RFP, right? For your financial advisor. I'll just say that our firm, and more firms are doing this, our firm does a standalone financial plan that we charge a fee for, because we firmly believe that that is a box of advice. And then if you hire us to implement it through investing to support that plan, then we charge a separate fee for the investments as a percentage of the investments, and we give you a discount on the percentage because you paid us for a financial plan. So it allows people who want to manage their own investments, they can, but if they also don't want to, they can hire us to do that. And I think you'll see that model more and more.
Right. I see it a lot, and I'm wondering, is there kind of a standard range for that kind of plan?
So it really depends on the complexity of it. Sometimes people start as low as $1,500 if it's really not a very complex plan, and they can somewhere around $3,000, $4,000 if somebody is mid-career and is trying to make decisions around more complex goals. And then for business owners, where we're pulling in their corporate attorney and their corporate tax person, all that kind of stuff, it can be $10,000, $12,000 because there's so much more, particularly succession planning. We have a exit strategist on our team, so it gets more complicated.
Thank you.
Sure.
I wondered if people have questions. I mean, obviously Tacy can't do an analysis of your personal situation during our webinar, but if you have something, just pop it into the chat. I'm keeping an eye on that. And I did put the list of questions to ask a financial planner. I also just dropped that link into the chat. And Ashley, there might be some other links that you can drop in if I've missed them. So just feel free to throw questions in as we go, and if I have a way to insert them, I will. Okay. Go ahead, Tacy. You just keep going.
All right. Can we talk about how often to check on portfolio? I often hear invest and just forget about it. Oh no. I do not say ever forget about it. And so I think I would encourage, so I have different times of the year that I look at different things. So for example, I always look at our my retirement plan assets in January, and then I look on my date of hire. And that's kind of an annual thing that I look at. And then we meet with our financial planner in the fall, so then I'm looking at them again in the fall as well. So January, for me, it's January, March, and then sometime September, October. So, but it is a calendar. I look at, we have a young adult, a non-binary kid who is in college, and I've always looked at their education assets in August. Sometimes it's like back to school. So I look at it in August. And so I would set up a regular schedule at least 3 or 4 times a year. Maybe your birthday is a good time to look at as well. Advice for investing as an American expat. Well, this is interesting, right? Because if you're overseas, there are very specific rules in different countries for expat investing. And I have a host of people who can guide you on that. I really believe firmly that you ought to work with a country specialist. Like I have somebody who works only in France, and I have somebody who works in Germany and Switzerland, and only works with American expats in those countries. So I would prefer that I recommend you to a specialist for that, because the tax rules are a little bit different, and there's some tax treatment that may be advantageous to you. And I'm happy to give those names to you, Jin Soon.
Great. Thank you, Tacy.
Sure. All right. Well, one question I often get asked is, should I work with a financial planner if I don't have any money? And, and I'm like, well, you should have a conversation with a financial planner, whether you have any money or not, because very often they will just give you some good advice to get you started and then allow them to check in with you every now and then. Just like Amy talked about her dad, getting her started on automated investing, right? I start the conversation early, and when you begin to have more money over time, then respect that they've given you some of their time, and perhaps decide that you want to have another conversation with them, but don't put it off just because you don't have money.
Casey, I want to flip that around because I know from some of the survey that we did before this that we had a lot of people who were interested in investing for retirement and retirement earnings. So they might be farther along in the process, but still need to work with somebody to make sure they're meeting those goals. Is there a time when it's too late to work with a financial planner?
No, it's not. The Washington Post section today actually had a great, or on Sunday it was, their business section was all about women in investing. And it talked about women in their 60s starting to talk with financial planners. Now, maybe you have to work longer, maybe you have to get side gigs, those kinds of things. But no, it's not ever too late to have those conversations, because it's like going to the doctor. You're having somebody who's been helping a lot of people in similar circumstances give you advice for something that is your specific situation, and it makes sense. Yep.
Now, somebody is asking about crypto. I know it's coming up a lot because of our incoming president, who's now done a little bit of a 360 on this, or 180, I guess. He hasn't gotten yet to the 360. Um, what's your thought on crypto?
So I am prohibited from a compliance from talking about crypto at this point. I will just say, watch and learn. The SEC is coming out with some very good rules around it, and I think that will be very helpful.
Yes, and in fact, the SEC, the outgoing SEC director, because he's not going to stay, even though he could, just was on MSNBC last night talking about those very rules. So watch out for that. And sorry, Danilda, we can't give you more details on that. Michelle asks, when researching a company to invest in, what type of deep dive research would you recommend doing to ensure the company is trustworthy and is being driven by competent future forward leadership?
So there's a couple of different sources that you can use. Like almost any brokerage firm, be it Schwab or Fidelity, is going to give you a basic report that will summarize at least what the analysts are saying about the numbers. Then the other, and a way to do this is to look at some of the portfolios of some of the ESG companies, like a Calvert or a Pax, and look at some of the companies that are in their portfolios, and they'll list them on their websites, because those organizations have already done some of the screening that you are looking for in terms of the leadership of the company and whether the company is trustworthy, because they've got analysts who really focus on that. So that's kind of another way and a faster way of going about it. The other is many you want to look at their sustainability reports. Some of the sustainability reports are sort of greenwashing, and if you read 2 or 3 from companies that are in the same industry, like financial services, you'll get a sense of who is more truthful in their sustainability reporting. So those are some good ways of of doing more research. Of course, you want to look at their annual report. Absolutely. And you start, whenever you look at an annual report, you start at the back, because you want to make sure that it's been audited by a third party auditor. And then you can flip to the front and start looking at the pretty pictures and the stats.
Well, and also just going back to your point about managers, I mean, if you're investing in a fund that has active managers, that is their job, is to research those companies.
Exactly.
And really keep their finger on the pulse of changes in management and leadership. I mean, they'll often do, I'm a big fan of Vanguard, and they do like all kinds of webinars where they'll talk about, you can, whatever fund you're in, that fund manager will have like a discussion of what trends they're seeing or what concerns they have. So, there's a lot of information that's out there, but of course it does take a lot of time to aggregate it, which is why it's nice to have someone to touch base with who's already in that ecosystem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We use a lot of Vanguard funds. Absolutely. And a lot of American funds in our portfolios. So shall we
Carry on.
carry on? All right. So a couple of, just to sort of final pieces of advice. And one is going back to what I started with, right? Internalize that women are great investors. Those 7 magnificent instincts, buying after we've done our research, buying and holding, all of those things. Those are things that we have inside of us already. Second of all, writing down your values, creating an investment statement, giving yourself some immediate gratification by setting up a savings goal using your bank app. Get something that's achievable. Look at the retirement plan. If you have one at work, look at the website of the retirement plan that you do, and take one of their quizzes about how ready are you for retirement? How much money do you need to be saving? And automate. We need to hack your brains. We know that from so much research, from Atomic Habits, from a lot of other researchers, that celebrating all these little steps is really important along the way.
Any last questions? We've got a couple more minutes of Tacy's valuable time. I guess one question I'm going to ask Tacy, you touched a little bit on diversification. And I know that, I've heard a sort of rule of thumb. It's like 75 stocks to 25 bonds while you're still working. And as you get closer to retirement or in retirement, it's more like 50-50. I've been given the advice that the whole 75-25 is not very good because bonds were not doing well for a while. And may still have issues, and there's all kinds of fancy things you can do with laddering bonds, and we won't get into all that, but just rule of thumb, I mean, do these things still exist, or is it really just have to be customized?
So they do still exist, right? So the historical recommendation is that before retirement, you want to have be more aggressive with your investments. And so therefore you have 75% to 80% of your investments in things that are going to grow, namely stocks, and 20 or 25% in bonds or cash. And then after you retire, you want that money to be more stable. And so you downsize the growth part of it and take it down to 50% stocks and 50% bonds. However, people are living a lot longer. And so absolutely taking it down 50% to equities at the day that you retire may not give you the growth that you need for the remaining 30 years
Right.
that you may live. This goes back to, though, you want to have, if you can afford it, 1 to 3 years of living expenses in a savings account even before you retire, so that you can draw on those savings if you need to draw on those savings. There is something in investing called the efficient frontier, and it's essentially that shows for every unit of risk that you're taking, every unit of return. And the efficient frontier, this goes back to modern portfolio theory and Harry Markowitz, but it's about 80% equities and 20% fixed income or cash. And after about 80%, the level of return that you get for the risk that you're taking is not as great. So I know some people say, well, I'm never going to use this money. I'm going to be 100% equities. And actually the extra risk that return that you're getting for that risk is not necessarily best. However, it really is dependent on everybody's own individual risk tolerance, their money story, what kind of resources they have as to what their allocation should be. Yeah.
Michelle is asking, that she says she's a value investor and invested in SunPower, Solar, and Proterra, who makes EVE buses, but both went bankrupt or nearly. Is there corporate sabotage that's going on that independent investors have to be wary of? Or just also about investing in individual companies, I think is also wrapped up in that question.
So let me start with investing with individual companies and say, as a first-time investor, I'm not sure it's a good thing to ever invest in an individual company, unless like it's a share of Disney that you got for a birthday or a bat mitzvah when you're 14 from your grandparents, because there is so much to learn about that individual company. So I encourage people to start out with a mutual fund or an exchange traded fund to learn about investing before they go into that. The issue of corporate sabotage, I would say that there's always corporate sabotage because that's part of the marketplace, rightly or wrongly, and whether and the fine line between sabotage and competition is what the lawyers often determine. So, and I think I can't comment specifically on individual companies because of compliance. I will say that certainly there's been tremendous amounts of investment because of the Inflation Reduction Act in solar companies and in alternative energy and in batteries and I think and infrastructure. And I think what we're learning, as so often happens, is that sometimes it is the companies that have been doing these things for the longest are often the companies that are the most stable. And companies that you may not think of as being strong in infrastructure, turns out they've been building highways and roads, and companies that have been offering EV vehicles for a long time. They're often the ones to invest in because they are the most stable.
Got it. I'm going to just put a list of funds in the chat from Calvert because they have a lot of those green energy funds that you could take a look at, Michelle, if you're interested. I'm sure there are many others that Tacy could point you towards as well. They're just one of the older ones.
Yeah. In fact, I was on the launch team for the Calvert Alternative Energy Fund.
And there you go. And in fact, that's a great way for us to wrap up because that's how Tacy and I met, through Barb Krumsick, who was the CEO of Calvert, who introduced us, and the rest is history, as they say. So I want to thank you again for joining us, Tacy. This has been so informative, and I've already got my investing values sticky note that I'm going to keep on my desktop for 2025 and make sure that what I'm doing is in alignment with that. And I'm really looking forward to the longer form workshop where we'll have some breakout groups and we'll be able to work on some things in the workbook when we're meeting at our Connect Summit in April in Las Vegas. So if you've got the time to do that, I would strongly encourage you to do so. We have some of the info is already up on our website, and we're waiting for it to show up on NAB's website. So I'm just going to put that in the chat as well, so you can see what we've got going for the summit, and we'll have a lot of other networking events while we're there. So we want to be sure to see all of you. And we also want to see all of you again on the Tequity Hub. So next month, we have something we're calling Storage Quest, which I know is a big issue for all of us, from whatever component of the industry, whether you're in pre-production, production, post, or distribution. I think we need an echo on that. So it's Storage Quest, when we advertise it. So if you're interested in that, and you might want to touch base with me separately, if you have suggestions for speakers, we've got a couple proposed for that. And thank you again to our sponsors, especially a shout out to Signian and AJA for hosting. And we appreciate your time, Tacy, and thank you for offering to follow up with folks.
Thank you so much. It's just a delight and a pleasure and an honor. It's a passion for me.